Welcome back to our last Becca's float dress sew-along. Today we're going to discuss just a little bit of how I prepare the yoke for the embroidered collar that's not a contrast one. We're going to talk about the different back placket that is offered, and then I also want to talk about dropping the yoke if you wanted to extend and have a different embroidery pattern. So let's start with that one. You may choose to do a completely different smocking design, or you may just choose to do, like I've done here, more of the simple cable stitch that, you know, is a nice complement to the embroidery design. And if that's what you're doing and you want to add stitches to the front, add embroidery depth to the front, it always looks best if you do the same thing. If you're going to drop the front embroidery design, it's ideal to have it end at the same level as your yoke in the back. So in that instance, you will need to add depth to the yoke in the back. And to do that, you're just going to lay your bottom pattern piece, so you'll have your yoke piece and then the lower armhole curve. You can pin those together at the seam line and extend it as far as you need to so that it will match up with your smocking in the front. And if it's, you know, not a perfect match, you can always cover that up a little bit with a sash on the back. I've done that in the past. And it's not critical that you do that, but that is how it looks best. So that's a good goal to aim for that. And you can also see, just for contrast purposes, I've used black piping on the front, but I didn't particularly want to draw attention to the black piping, you know, by adding black piping to the back. Again, that's a personal preference thing. And then you can see I've used the black contrast thread for the hem here, which I thought pulled it all together quite nicely. If you're making the view that is the solid colored fabric with the embroidery directly on the yoke, you'll want to cut out a rectangle that's a little bit larger and a little bit wider so that you've got a little bit of extra room all around the yoke piece. Then you will take your yoke pattern piece, and you can see I've got this traced out with my blue washout marker. And after tracing the yoke piece on, you can trace your design, whichever design pattern you choose to use for this. After you've got all this traced onto the fabric, then you want to go ahead and interface it. And you can see I've got a lightweight interfacing on the back. And then you are ready to do all of your hand embroidery. And as you can see, I have also applied the piping while it is still in this rectangle shape. It's easier to get a more accurate stitch for the piping if you do it while it's still in a rectangle shape. And you can see where I've clipped the corners so that I could make the turns. Now I'm ready to cut this out and press the seam allowances back and then apply it to the smocked skirt, just like we did with the print version. When I pleated the fabric, I left 2 pleats in the center back that were not smocked, and that is so that you can cut down the center back to place your placket. And those 2 pleats, each pleat covers 1/4 inch. So this is your 1/4 inch seam allowance for the placket when you install the continuous placket in the back. So I wanted to talk about the back overlap for a minute. As you know, the center back is 1/2 inch from both yokes fold line. So you've got your continuous placket, which is 1/2 inch wide, and that matches up with your 1/2 inch center back line. Now, to match your center backs, you actually have to overlap this 1/2 inch so that it is matching the center back line here, which is fine, except you do get a funny angle to your continuous bias band, which isn't a problem. It's pretty much hidden in the fullness of the skirt. So you can do your back that way. That is the way almost all patterns that I own have told you to do the continuous lap and the overlap here. Because if you overlapped it just so that the bias bands meet, which I think would be nice, you don't really have the full lapped section that is necessary for the back because your center backs aren't matching. The center backs are both a 1/2 inch in from the folded edge. I hope that makes sense. So the alternate way that you can do your center back lap is on the underside, which I button mine this way. A lot of people will button theirs the other way. So whichever is your underlap, if you stop your continuous bias at the center back line, which I have marked here in blue, then when the dress is completed and you close it up, the continuous bias is lapped over itself so that the smocking just meets at the edges, but the overlap is correct because you've got your 1/2 inch here and your 1/2 inch from the folded edge here, and so you've got the correct lap. Your continuous bias hangs nicely, you don't have that weird angle, and your overlap is correct. So I'm giving you that option. You can make your continuous back either way. Technically, I believe this would be the more correct way, but as I've said, most of the patterns I've sewn with for the last 30 some years have you do it this way so that the smocked piece goes to the edge, to the folded edge of both the yokes, but then you just have to overlap it more. So decide which way you prefer to do your back and just follow through that way. The next thing I would like to mention here is that this dress can be made as a ready-to-smock. That's how I made this particular dress, and because of that, when I started smocking, I went ahead and I smocked cable stitches until I got to the V, at which point I did an outline stitch and a stem stitch and then finished again with a cable. So that's another option. I really like the way that that looked, and then I followed it with just the other rows of just the cable stitch. And as you can see, I chose to do 3 colors of cable stitches as opposed to the 2 cables that are given in the instructions. So don't be afraid to mix it up a little bit and do something slightly different. It still turns out to be super cute. The last option that I'd like to talk about is the option to do the collar as a machine embroidery design. You may either not have the skills or the time or even the inclination to do all hand stitching for the collar, but you like the look of it. And so Joy Welsh has been wonderful to work with. She has applique for kids, and she has created a very similar look with a machine embroidery design, and she designed it to perfectly fit the collar piece for this particular pattern. So I will put a link down below to her shop so that if machine embroidery is something you would prefer to do, you can do that as well. And you can see here I again chose to use 3 colors and do the outline and the stem stitch to finish that one. And this makes a really sweet spring or Easter type dress, or it would even be pretty. I think it would be gorgeous in white and shades of ecru for the smocking. That would make a beautiful portrait dress or something for a wedding. So anyway, these are just the last few bits and ideas I wanted to share with you. If you've enjoyed these videos and don't want to miss out on any upcoming videos, be sure and hit the subscribe button below.